Jeremy Peters, you're talking about the president trying hard to keep his base, but it seems to me that's been part of his problem since day one. Steve Bannon's attitude has been, we're just going to play to our most hardcore nationalist, not even right wing, that would be insulting the right wing, Trumpist base, and everybody else be damned. And as we've been saying here again all along, that's what gets you to 36%. Now, it's got him at 33%. So does he keep doing the same thing that Steve Bannon's been telling him to do, which is basically chained him to
and whoever else in
historically low approval ratings?
Over the last few days, Joe, what you've seen is part of that strategy that you just described, is going hard at the base. This explains why we've seen President Trump announce actions against Latino gangs. It's why we saw yesterday his pronouncement that the United States should cut legal immigration in half. So, yes, that is still a part of it. However, if you look at the numbers in that latest Quinnipiac poll, having in the 70s and an approval rating among Republicans is not great. And this is something that President Trump's aides have raised with him, saying, you know, this needs to be a lot higher. And as John Podhoretz was noting, there's been a steady decline in his approval ratings, and it happened around 3 different points. First was when he tweeted about Barack Obama wiretapping Trump Tower. Then was the healthcare collapse, because that displayed that Republicans, including President Trump, just simply could not govern. And number 3 was when he fired Jim Comey, and it's been, you know, he's been unable to recover since then. Now, I will say that the bright spot for some Republicans when they look at these numbers in individual states, and this is what a lot of Republican strategists are focusing on right now. You look at the states where Trump did very well in November, and his approval ratings among conservatives and Republicans are still in the mid to high 80s. But let's not forget that Richard Nixon never dropped below 50% among Republicans until the day he resigned.
Yeah, and let's also remember, John Podhoretz, if Donald Trump's approval rating in the state of Alabama is 80%, that's Donald Trump running against the ghost of Hillary Clinton, the mainstream media, you know, academia. The second you have a flesh and blood conservative running against him, if Mike Pence were to challenge him in the primary, or if Jeff Flake were to challenge him, suddenly people are like, oh, wait a second, we don't have to have somebody that acts crazy in the White House that actually is a hardcore conservative, and we can vote for him.
But you're jumping, you know, pretty far ahead in time, and we're going to have an election next year, and the simple fact of the matter is, if he's got 80% in Alabama, it's not like a Democrat is going to win, you know, the Senate in Alabama. I mean, there is actually a senatorial race in Alabama, and no Democrat is going to win that now or in 2018. That's not the issue. The plain political issue is Democrats need 24 House seats to take the House back in 2018, and the table is being set pretty nicely for them to get that number. And if they get that number or 10 more than that number, he's going to get impeached.
Yeah,
I'm not saying he's going to be convicted and thrown out of office. I'm saying that the House
he will
impeach him if Democrats have a 10-seat majority. And if he doesn't right the ship, he's writing his own. You know, he's Clinton in 1998 and 1999 with no recovery possible. Yeah. Clinton was doing that at a time of explosive economic growth.
Steve Rattner, and yet despite the fact I've seen some really impressive Democratic ads out there, the Democratic Party is...
We'll see.
No, they're clueless.
That ad gave me a lot of hope yesterday.
Well, there are a couple of great ads
there's some great
out
candidates
there.
out there.
I'm talking about the National Party is clueless. And they are just as disconnected from working class Americans as they've ever been. I mean, are they going to blow this advantage that Donald Trump's been given to them? Is there concerns among Democratic activists and Democratic donors that the Democratic leadership still doesn't get it.
There are a lot of concerns among the Democratic activists about what's going on in the party. Remember, the Republican Party, as we saw in health care and we've seen in other issues, has its own set of divisions within it. The Democratic Party has its own set of divisions within it. You have, obviously, the progressive wing, the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren wing, that have a set of policies and a set of things they want. And you have sort of, I would call them almost the remnants of the centrist wing. They're a little bit like the French resistance. They're hiding in the woods and they're a little bit afraid to come out. But they're there. And that has not been resolved. And what you see in the so-called new Democratic platform that's come out in the last few days are kind of a bunch of fairly small bore, specific kinds of ideas that they could build a consensus around, but not a vision. It's a better deal,
right.
but not a real vision of where they want to go and what they're. And we'll get to this on immigration. Immigration is one of those issues. I'm sorry.
I said it sounds like a Hardee's ad, a better deal, and the immigration issue, Lonnie. That's a perfect example, and I'm going to get jumped by saying this because I'm in Manhattan, and
No, you're not.
Yeah, I'm not.
No, you're not.
There's a perfect example. The Democratic Party has lost white working class Americans because of immigration. That's an issue, and there is such a blind spot that they don't understand. They really don't understand that for a lot of working class Americans, a flood of immigrants coming to the United States means not only they lose their jobs, but they also are smart enough to know it depresses their wages. So when they hear Donald Trump saying, hey, let's lessen the number of immigrants coming to the United States of America, working class
Even
Democrats.
if it defies the actual numbers in terms of,
working class
politically.
Democrats think it's pretty good for wages.
They have no coherence to their agenda right now. And to your point about the opportunity for Democrats, look at that number with white working class Americans. The president being underwater gives the Democrats that opportunity, but there's no coherence to the agenda. They have a policy challenge, they have a messaging challenge, they have a generational challenge in the Democratic Party. Where are the leaders in the Democratic Party? They're seen as being from a different generation. That is a problem that they're not going to solve, by the way, by hiring an ad agency to tell them to rebrand a pizza commercial to define their agenda. They need an agenda. And they need a generation of new leaders.
Can I push back on that?
Sure.
Okay, just to your specific point on immigration, if you go back to 2006, you'll find Paul Krugman writing that immigration of low-skilled workers threatens white working-class Americans. If you go back to 2015, you'll find Bernie Sanders essentially saying the same thing, for which he was shouted down.
Right.
Now the Democratic Party is firmly, unilaterally, unquestionably on the side of, bring us your huddled, tired masses. We want more immigrants. We're in favor of all immigrants. And that's what cost them the white working class voters.
And it's what will continue to. And also, just as a matter of course, it also does drive down wages for working class Americans.
But where I want to push back is this. The model of a midterm election, obviously, for an opposing party is 2010, right? Republicans won 63 seats in the House. And in 1994, which you were a participant in, they won 52 seats in the House and they won the Senate, right? So here's the key. There was no coherence to the Republican agenda either in 94 or 2010. They cohered around a couple of pretty simple messages. And in 2010, that was, Obama is spending us into the sewer and is ignoring the Constitution. When Republicans win, they get into the House. Suddenly, because they have no coherent agenda, it's a nightmare. They can't agree on anything. They shut the government down. All sorts of things happen that are not good. But that doesn't mean, so I don't think Democrats, it may be bad for Democrats in 2019 because they won't have a coherent agenda. But if they can cohere around a couple of pretty simple anti-Trump messages, one of them being the classic message that he's not getting anything done and he's failing everybody, he's also failing his own voters. That can get them to Election Day. That's all I'm saying. And then after Election Day, it's all up for grabs.
Do nothing, Republicans.
So, Casey Hunt, we often talk about and ask questions, especially to you, about how Republicans are navigating this presidency. What do you hear from the Democrats in terms of the potential moment of opportunity that is before them?
Well, I want to pick up on what John was just saying about Democrats and the comparisons to the Tea Party wave in 2010, because it's a good point, yes, where their messages were lined up, but a reminder that a lot of the candidates that got elected in 2010 came to Washington and became massive thorns in the side of Republican leaders. These were not people that were coming out of some grand national Republican plan to take back government. And my instincts are that may be happening on the Democratic side here too. I mean, look at the sheer number of Democratic challengers. I was just looking it up here. There are, according to one study, 209 Democratic challengers announced already. To put that in perspective, this time during the last round of midterm elections, there were 44 Democratic challengers. So it's just completely exploded. But I think that the analysis that Democrats are not positioned well to take advantage of it from a national party perspective is absolutely true. And one question that I've been starting to ask a lot of these Democrats that want leadership jobs is, hey, why did Hillary Clinton lose in a single sentence? Can you identify what that is? Because that in turn will give you the answer as to how to fix it. And I think there are in the populist wing, people will say she lost because of Goldman Sachs. Sorry, Steve, but it's
I never worked at Goldman Sachs.
He did.
You always get smeared with that. I wish I worked for Goldman Sachs.
You have too much hair to work for Goldman
Yeah.
Sachs.
I'm
I heard
trying
that
to. I've been
yesterday.
begging to work for Goldman Sachs
Get
for
you some
10
shares.
years.
Go ahead.
But it's
I'd say
the
don't-
elitist
won't
argument,
say.
right? It's this idea that the Democrats are out of touch there, and I think the National Party is still very much wired into that as a donor base, and so I think the question is, can they get away from it?
There's just
Yeah.
also,
Yep, great point.
just as far as on the ground, Mike, there's also an ideological problem with the Democrats that if you run anywhere in the South, from Kentucky down to South Florida, over to Missouri, and you're a Democrat running for the House, it's just easy to say, your first vote's going to be Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. That's the government. It's the same thing, just for our Democratic friends that watch the show, it's the same thing Democrats were able to say to somebody running in New England. Oh, you're going to go down and help Newt Gingrich and Tom DeLay and Dick Armey. Does not help.
The larger problem I would submit that the Democrats have is rooted in two things: timidity and elitism. I mean, they've been so timid about taking on these issues like immigration. Explain immigration to people. And when you explain it to people, you say, look, people coming into, they're not taking your job.
Right.
They're not going to lower your wages. Automation, technology, globalism, those are your enemies. And they're your enemies because we've let you down. We've let you sit there in the mill that is going to leave, if it hasn't left already, your hometown, and you're going to be unemployed or making, $8 an hour doing something where you were making $18 or $25 an hour. But they're so timid about these things, and they're so fractured by special interest, and they've been dragged to the left, out of the mainstream of this country, and there's no mystery as to why they're losing.
Yep. All right, still, but the question is how to win again, and I think after such a devastating loss, it's going to be easier said than done.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.